Sweet, dude. Sweet. Well, thanks for coming on, man. Yeah, Cassidy, welcome to the podcast. So we met not through the Marine Corps actually, but through the local car scene here in Southern California. And I don't know if it was if we did through the Camp Pendleton Auto Club or if it was just at a random meet out in town. Do you remember which one it was?
No, so I think the first time you and I met was at the one of the meets on base. I think it was actually at the hospital.
Okay.
At the hospital parking garage, and I don't remember exactly how the conversation came up, but yeah, the realization came to both of us that you and I were both JTACs at the time. You were getting ready to EAS, and I think I was actually not even a JTAC yet. I think I was still working on the JFO piece.
I think you were getting ready to go to school. You had lat moved.
That's right.
To 0861 from 0341, and we were getting ready to go to school, and we just kind of started talking about that and stuff.
Yeah. I lat moved. What was that? 2015. After 6 years as a 41.
As an infantryman, came over to be a pogue because it's way cooler on this side.
All the Afghan deployments at that point had kind of dried up, so it was. I was bored of it. I was ready for a little more, what I thought was going to be downtime, a little more time out of the field, outside of the 03 community, and then that was a mistake. Turns out I was busier as an 0861 than I was on the 03 side.
Oh, so, all my infantrymen out there, did you hear that? Did you hear the 0861 is in the field and busier? Dude, it's the reality of that job because you're constantly supporting somebody's field exercise, a TACP shoot, going out with, even like deployments and stuff like that. When you're doing your workup, you're going on those field ops and everything like that. And then when you became a JTAC even during the certification process of the JTAC piece, you have to go to the field, to stay on top of your controls and stuff like that. And even, in those beginning phases, and in my opinion, you should all the time, but in those beginning phases especially, even if you're not getting controls, you need to be out on the OP just to watch other people get controls and kind of work through those, see them mess up or whatever, see scenarios that someone else is going through before you yourself have to do it. That way you can kind of consider it. I think that kind of exposure and stuff. But that's the reality of the JTAC world and stuff like that, is just field ops and weird ones too.
Yeah, it was a weird transition for me. So when I initially signed up to go be an RDFO, it was pretty much what I thought my career was going to be. And I was like, yeah, I'm just going to spend the rest of my career, however long that happens to be, up on a hill calling for fire. And then didn't realize until after I'd gotten back to the fleet, graduated the schoolhouse and everything from just the RD Scout Observer piece, that wasn't it. It was, hey, by the way, like there's this thing called a JFO and a JTAC. And I was like, oh, cool, what's that? And they're like, that's where you call naval guns and RD and mortars and air. And I was like, time out, like air, what the hell is that? I was like,
let's drop some bombs, man. Yeah. Well, I want to talk about your lat move and kind of how that went for you. As being a lat mover myself, I can relate. And I know there's a lot of people out there that wonder, especially coming from the 03 field, to lat move into other fields. So I think that'll be really good advice. But let's start back to when you actually joined. You came in as an infantryman, right? Did you sign up to be infantry?
So initially, how I actually came in is a little bit of a story. I did a couple of years of college. It didn't work out, and in my mid-20s, was just kind of living the good old party life. And my best friend from first grade, he and I had been friends, from first grade, middle school, high school, and whatnot. And then he got into some trouble and decided it was time to make a move, get out of Ohio, get out of Cleveland. And then we decided, hey, let's just go. I think it was his idea, actually. Let's go talk to recruiters. So we did. And initially, I'd been working at a golf course at the time. So I was like, yeah, I'm kind of mechanically savvy. Let's just do the motor T thing. And the recruiter was like, sweet, yeah, we need motor T dudes. And I went home and kind of thought about it. I hadn't even talked to my parents about it at this point. And I was 25 years old. Yeah. So their opinion, I'm not going to say it didn't matter, but it wasn't on my the high priority list.
Yeah.
So when I went home and thought about it, I was like, you know what? Like at the time, they're still talking about doing this draft thing. And I was like, you know what? Like I'm young enough, I'm fit enough, I can still go out and do physical shit. So I was like, you know, let's just do the infantry thing. So I did. I went back to the recruiter and said, hey, like I want an infantry contract. He looked at me like I was crazy. He's like, are you sure? He's like, we don't have any infantry contracts right now. I was like, yeah, let's do that. I'm like, I'll wait. He's like, okay, well, I'll dig one up. Sure enough, dug one up. And then, yeah, went to boot camp in October of 2009, graduated in January of 2010, and then hit the fleet as a mortarman. I think it was like the week before Easter, 2010.
When you were going through SOI, did you want to become a mortarman? Was that your first pick, or did you even care? Were you like,
No.
oh shit, there's options?
At that point, yeah, I didn't even know there were options at that point. But my wife's grandfather was actually a mortarman during World War II in the Pacific.
Oh, cool.
So when I had heard about that, I was kind of like, you know what, this seems kind of cool, kind of interesting. Like, still, what I thought was going to be, like a few feet away from like the front line kind of deal. It turns out the case anyway. But yeah, I passed their little written exams and whatnot, and turns out I'm halfway decent with math, numbers, and being able to think on my feet relatively quick. So that was the route it went.
So let's talk mortarman, because I think you're the first mortarman I've had on here. So when you're in school, are you fully trained out of school on like the 60, the 81, shooting handheld, like all the different ways to engage those different weapon systems, or is it just like a baseline and then you go to the fleet and get more advanced experience?
It's pretty basic. Like you cover all of that like through the schoolhouse, or at least we did. I know the schoolhouse is changing right now, but yeah, back then it was you're going to use the 81. You're going to use the 60s. You're going to shoot handheld at least once. It's just all the basic check marks. Call for fire, yada yada yada. Get the gun up in X number of seconds. Small deflection versus large deflection, that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was pretty basic. And then once you actually hit the fleet, you have to learn how to think on your feet and actually do some problem solving.
Yeah, and you probably get to shoot a lot more and get refine your skills a lot more at your unit, right? Were you guys shooting monthly, or do you think less or more?
The workup tempo at the time was pretty heavy, so we got to shoot probably once a month, every month and a half or so.
Yeah.
During that workup, but yeah, I mean, this was back in 2010.
Yeah.
Getting ready to go to. I mean, I remember sitting in SOI, like going to breakfast in the mornings and watching CNN on the TVs that they had in the chow hall, and watching the push through Marja, through Helmand. And then when I hit the fleet, like I think it was day one, they're like, surprise, like those places that you've been hearing about on the CNN and on the news, that's where you're going in a couple months here. So that was that was a reality check, we'll put it that way.
Yeah. Can you talk through the different positions on a mortar team and what each person's role is?
Oh boy, it's been a while. So
yeah, sorry for putting you on the spot.
You got your gunner. He's the dude who's actually he's dropping the rounds, and that's pretty much it. He's dropping the rounds and getting the actual gun up. So the way the sight works on a 60 millimeter mortar, or on 81s and even 120s, if I'm not mistaken, is that sight lines up on like a rail system that attaches to the tube, and then out in front you have a stake, and you line that sight up with the stake, and that's your primary direction of fire, or at least your reference. And then based off of that reference, you'll be given a correction. So you got one dude that's bracing the bipods and prepping the rounds. You've got your ammo man who's back, behind the gun, getting rounds ready, and then your other boy is actually on the site, and yeah. Again, it's been a couple of years, so
Yeah.
it's not very difficult to figure out, but being able to figure out when something goes wrong, what's the next step? Just going through your basic drills to unfuck the gun.
Troubleshoot and stuff.
Yeah, troubleshoot the gun, doing your immediate remedial actions. I think the first time I had a misfire on the gun line was actually in SOI, and that was, being a private, first time shooting a mortar, and all of a sudden all you hear is tink, tink, tink at the bottom of the tube, and it's like, oh God, I know what has to come next. You have to, try to squeeze that round out, and if it doesn't go off through handheld, you're tipping that tube over and catching that bitch with your hands. So that was a little awkward the first time.
Yeah, I bet, dude. That's got to be a pit in your stomach, when you're doing that. Which I don't know how. I mean, how many times have you done it now? Like, does that happen in the fleet very often that you get a misfire like that?
It's not uncommon. I'd say more than it should. Probably one in every 40, 50 rounds it will end up being.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it's pretty frequent that you'll have to do some kind of remedial action on the round.
Damn, that's pretty wild.
Whether that's there's just too much that can go wrong. So in Arty, it's like, hey, yeah, you jam the round in, or the actual explosive, the round, and then all the charges behind it, and the primer, pull the cord, and it's supposed to go boom. Well, with the mortar, when you drop that round down the tube, if the pin is recessed at all, or whatever the case may be, if the round just doesn't take, or gets stuck in the tube, or whatever, then you have to go into your remedial actions. And figure out how to either fire that round from the tube or get it out of the tube without it going off in your hands.
Yeah.
And I think there was an incident probably, I think it was 2014, maybe early 2015 with 1-9, where they had like 8 or 9 dudes killed on the line from a 60s round. Essentially, my understanding is that the dudes double fed the tube, jammed a round down it at night, and they were going handheld, and which basically for handheld means that you got one guy dropping the round down the tube, round goes to the bottom, and then there's a trigger on the tube that you actually have to squeeze to set that round off. And what had happened was the whole line was doing this, and the guns weren't very far apart. I think there were like 2 or 3 guns on the line. So a gunner drops the round down the tube, thinks that the round goes off because he hears the tube next to him.
Yeah.
And when that happens, he grabs another round and throws the next one. As the guy is squeezing, or as the actual gunner is squeezing the trigger for that round, that first round, and then the round's essentially detonated inside the tube. Tube exploded, rounds exploded, and shredded everyone around him.
Yeah, that was I remember when that happened, and it was kind of unbelievable, at the really time, that many guys had got killed from that. I mean, I only say that because I was at Fort Bragg when we had a howitzer explode from one of our batteries, and that when they were loading the round, the fuse was malfunctioned and it was set to go off already. So when they jammed it in, that shock of them jamming it in on that point detonating fuse blew the round up in the tube as they were loading it. And no one died. Like a bunch of injuries. There was, obviously the whole gun crew was fucked up. Corman almost died that was at the gun. He severed his femoral artery. But I think the battalion medical, I want to say the battalion medical officer just happened to be in that area and got over to him and I think tourniqueted him up and stuff like that and saved him. So that happened in 2010. And then when I heard that mortar round went off and blew up and it killed, what'd you say? 8 guys, right? 8 or 9?
Eight or nine. I think it was 9. Don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure it was 9.
It was quite a few. I was shocked. I was like, I can't believe. I mean, I don't know, man. That's just one of those incidents where that's just horrible, you know?
Yeah.
It's just like a horrible, and it's got to be like a fearful thing that Mortarman think about, or try not to think about at least, you know, something like that occurring.
Yeah, it's like that Swiss cheese effect that, you know, a lot of things have to line up right for it to go that wrong.
Yeah.
Number one, they were doing some unconventional shit. They were trying to illuminate the battlefield. So they were trying to do like a coordinated illume. But they were doing it in like a goofy manner, if I remember right. I don't remember the exact details, but they were trying to do a coordinated illume, handheld. All the guns on the line were too close to each other, or at least 2 of the guns were. They're only like 15 meters as opposed to the standard. I think it's supposed to be like 50 meters apart. And for the A gunner to drop a round down after thinking he heard his tube go off when it turned out to be the other one. It's just a lot of things went wrong, and
it's tragic stuff, man.
Yeah, a lot of guys got killed for it. It's just nothing about the job is safe. You know, nothing about the Marine Corps. You know, when we look at the LAV accidents that have happened, the helo crashes recently, Ospreys going down. Even in training, like, it's not a safe job. So,
we put so much emphasis on safety, and I think for the amount of crazy stuff we do, there's a pretty good like track record, and I think that kind of gives us a sense of a false sense of safety. You know what I'm saying? Like, you kind of forget, like, hey man, we're blowing shit up, like we're throwing 100-pound explosives downrange, like in the case of artillery, Or hey, we're spy rigging, so we're dangling from the bottom of an aircraft 500 feet off the ground.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, all these weird things that in the real world sounds insane. Like, why would you ever want to do something like that? But we do it so much, and we have specialists, you know, like hearse masters to take care of that, or artillery chiefs to make sure that the gun's right. That overall we have a really good record, but those moments happen that everything just didn't work out right, you know?
Yeah, and it happens to the best of them. You know, Paul Smith tells the story of the 500-pound concrete bomb dropping, you know, right next to the truck. You know, but that was, you know, again, Swiss cheese effect. The pilot was confused. The JTAC was new. The officer that was, you know, kept opening the truck door and confusing the pilot, and then the actual evaluator didn't catch on that the pilot said, "Hey, yeah, I see 2 marks." Should have set off all kinds of, you know, bad idea in his head. But I think a lot of times we end up taking either just completely disregard safety or, you know, just accept that the job is not safe and we're going to roll with it anyway.
Yeah, there's going to be incidents, you know. You can't be on the OP for a whole career without something happening, without incidents happening. I've almost been hit by naval gunfire at MOS school. I had a piece of shrapnel skip between me and an instructor. Like, we're at OP2, I think, the one that's out on the point of San Clemente Island.
Yeah.
And with the little bunker, you know, where all the MOS school guys go.
Yeah. It's and the one that's on the south end of the island, kind of below. Yeah, there's a high OP on the north side, and then there's the lower OP.
It's right above those artillery pieces on the beach and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that was the target. And my buddy Graham, I think he was the observer, and he was calling it in. And as naval gunfire is, rounds are landing short and long. And I guess when they land short and hit the water, there's something with the impact into the water that causes the shrapnel to go farther, apparently. And me and this instructor were standing there on the OP, just looking down at the impacts, watching. And, dude, this big piece of dust kicked up between our feet and then kept going. And we're like, what the hell? And there was this no-glow, this naval gunfire liaison officer that was in a pickup truck like 40 feet behind us. And this like hand-sized chunk of metal landed in the pickup truck bed with her. And we were like, holy crap. And the instructor's like, that would have hurt, but you'd have been okay. And I'm like, dude, that would have fucking like fucked my leg all up, man. Like, that's crazy. So that happened. And then my very first shoot with 2nd Battalion, 10th Marines, I was a lap mover like you were. Very first field op, they're shooting the check round, which is, for those that don't know, that's the first round, and it's supposed to be the one to verify that the guns are, shooting inside the impact area and inside the safety box. There's like 2 safeties. One, the safety box that is inside the impact area. And they were shooting that very first round, that check round, and I was on OP5 at Camp Lejeune. And it landed... So the gunner or the chief didn't check the powder, and the powder monkey guy only put in half the charge that he was supposed to, and it landed 50 meters from us. That was my very first artillery shoot. I had a HE round land 50 meters from us at OP5.
Oh my gosh.
And then incidents like you're talking about, like Paul Smith. He came on the podcast and talked about that incident specifically. I think I made a clip out of that in the YouTube clips.
You did.
Yeah, where a concrete bomb almost, what do you say, like 20 feet from him or 15 feet from him?
Yeah,
something crazy
it was
close.
It was within 20 meters. I remember that. It was close.
You were out there, right?
I was not out there. I know the guys who were out.
So that's one of those things where in the JTAC community, it's a small community. So something like that happens, word gets around and everybody knows. And it's like, okay, we all know who's at fault or not at fault or whatever, and everybody remembers that shit, and it becomes a lesson learned too,
Yeah.
So, anyways, backing up to, I know there's all kinds of incidents. We could talk incidents probably all day long. Okay. When you got to the fleet, brand new Mortarman, what was it like for you checking into the fleet? 1 and 2, how long did you have before your first deployment was scheduled?
It was bad. It was rough. So when I first hit the fleet, I think it was my very first weekend. I almost got stabbed by some random drunk dude who was EAS.
Really?
I can't make this shit up. So I check into the fleet. We don't get to, or at least myself and a kid named Davis, who's in prison now. Whole nother story. This is my roommate. He and I went through SOI together, boot camp together, yada, yada. And this is like a Friday night. And we're just chilling in the room. But our barracks, we are put in a different barracks than our company. I don't even remember. I don't know whose barracks we were actually in. But they were like, hey, yeah, this is your room. Like, this is where you're going to be until whenever. Okay, cool. And then Friday night rolls around, and there's a commotion outside my room. So I go out, I just poke my head out the door. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? There's 2 dudes out there who've been out there. They were grilling, for the past like 2 hours, and they're absolutely hammered. Well, they get into a scuffle. So, like, I see them rolling around, like they knock over the grill, all the hot coals, the charcoal goes everywhere. So I run out, and my 25-year-old PFC ass decides it's a good idea to drag this dude off the other dude and try to separate this thing, break it up so that no one rolls into the hot coals. That didn't go over well with one of them. And this kid turns around and comes after me. It's like, dude, like, I don't want anything to do with this. Like, I'm just trying to break this up, trying to make sure you guys don't get hurt, yada, yada, yada. I was like, I'm going back to my room. You guys are idiots. 2 minutes later, I see a shadow go past the window. Shadow comes back. Next thing I know, the glass is breaking and there's a hand with a knife in it coming through the blinds, through the window.
Oh my God, dude, that's crazy.
What's going on? I was like, holy shit. So again, like I run back to the bathroom because that's the only place that's like, okay, well, if this dude decides he's going to come into my room and like come after me, like this is where I'm going to stay. So I run back to the bathroom, wait like 2 minutes, lock myself in, and then come out. There's shattered glass all over the place. I don't know if the dude actually came into the room or not. Like, I didn't stick around to find out. But then I was like, okay, well, my window's busted out now. So now what? So I got to call the duty. So I go find the duty. The duty comes out, and the duty's like, well, what the hell happened? I was like, some drunk dude like busted out my window. But that was weekend 1 in the fleet.
Was it hard for you coming to the fleet as a PFC, being 25 years old?
It was weird. It was weird. So most of the guys that were in charge of me were, a couple of years younger than I was. But at the same time, being a little bit older, I had a little bit more respect from my leadership, at least. Not so much the guys who were directly over me, like the senior lances, but the corporals and the sergeants, and I guess even the staff and officers had a little bit more respect for me coming in so late. I don't know why. It is what it is. But beyond that, yeah, it was coming into the fleet as a 25-year-old, and with the realization that we're getting ready to go into Afghanistan, we're going to Marja, like this is happening, and it's happening December timeframe, if I remember right. We left shortly before Christmas.
How long were you in the fleet before you found out you were deploying? Or you actually said in MOS school that they were told you ahead of time that it's where you would be going, but you didn't know it was definitive, right?
They didn't tell me in MOS school. I remember watching CNN, watching the push into Marja through Helmand on CNN while I was in SOI. And then once I hit the fleet, it was day one, end of the day formation. First Sergeant Henderson gave us this speech we're going to Marja, yada, yada, yada. They just lost 2 or 3 dudes that had to be identified by their demo records. They were blown up. I was like this is the reality of what I'm coming into. The whole time thinking I should have stayed in college.
I should have went for that motor T route. I could see
Well, the other thought was at the process at the time was well, if I'm going to be dodging IEDs, maybe I have a better chance of spotting them if I'm walking instead of just rolling down some dusty ass road.
Yeah, possibly, right? So how was that? How was the workup for you? And do you feel like they were? I don't know. Did you feel like you were playing catch up, or did you feel like you had a pretty good handle on everything by the time you guys came up for deployment?
3-9 was actually one of the better units, if not the best unit that I've been attached to. For whatever reason, for all 3-9 shortcomings, that first deployment, I felt like I was pretty well prepared. I did 90% of the workup as a mortarman, and then I think it was right before we went to ITX for our evaluation that the platoon sergeant at the time was a gunny, Gunny Kimball, came out and was like, hey, who's been hunting their entire life, who's familiar with guns and who shoots expert, this, that, and the other thing. It's like, well, that's me. He's like, okay, well, you're going to be the platoon DM. I was like, I'm a mortarman, but okay, here we go. So that's how that went. And really most of the deployment, I ended up in a MAP platoon, which is mobile assault platoon. You're supposed to be QRF for anything that went down in the AO or the operation. So as the quick reaction force, we're supposed to be able to mobilize, jump in the trucks, grab all our stuff, and go to whoever needs help quickly. So that was supposed to be our job. What we really ended up doing 99% of the time was running supplies around from the forward operating base, Bob Marja, to all the other combat outposts and patrol bases and just other random places. Every now and then we get to chase someone down on motorcycles or go support another platoon that had something going on. But the vast majority of what we did was just run supplies around. But we were outside the wire every day for 6 to 12 hours, sunup to sundown. That's what was going on.
Yeah. So when you got tapped to be the designated marksman for your platoon, was there any kind of special training they sent you to or anything like that? Or was it just like, hey, here's the rifle, you're good?
It wasn't even so much a here's the rifle thing. Gunny was like, hey, yeah, you're going to be the DM. I was like, okay, we'll go with that. And then I think I got to shoot the rifle. I got to shoot the Mark 12, which was pretty much an M16, kind of souped up, had the free floated barrel, chrome line barrel, and I think it actually had an M4 lower receiver, so it could go full auto if you really needed it. But it had the Leopold optic on it. It was a nice accurized 5.56 rifle. and I got to shoot that I think one time in 29 Palms, and that was pretty much it. Beyond that, we went to Afghanistan. I brought my own. They gave me an M16, so I brought my own optic, a heavier optic. Brought my own bipods and swapped those both out as soon as I got there. So I was like, well, I don't have, the Mark 12, but I do have something a little bit better. So we'll roll with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much what that wheel did down to.
Yeah, when being out there running supplies and stuff like that is different, obviously, than your normal like infantry deployment where you're on foot patrols and like getting to know the area and like you're interacting with the same people all the time and things like that. What was it like for you to like be able to kind of have the freedom to cruise around the countryside and see more of the area of operations than like everybody, most of the people within your battalion?
You could definitely tell. I know a lot of guys, a lot of the patrol bases got shuffled around, or we were building new patrol bases and breaking old patrol bases down. Mm-hmm. But watching all that happen and being able to go from one side of the AO to the opposite side and, over the course of like 30, 40 minutes and see the difference between the two was pretty eye-opening. I think it was, what was the cop? Or FOB, or no, what was it? It was a PP. Sailor Laura was 3rd Platoon's PB. And that was the one where every time they crossed a certain northing or easting, they would get hit. They would take fire. They knew if we crossed this line or passed this cemetery, we're going to take contact. Whereas in other places, it was just really heavily IED focused. Further up north to the northwest, if I'm not mistaken, northwest was more IEDs, mm-hmm. and southeast was more consistent and regular contact. But one of the OPs my platoon got stuck at all the time. We did like a 2-week rotation, so we'd be doing this QRF map platoon thing for 2 weeks, and then we'd be out at OPs. OP Savannah and Lexington. We'd split the platoon between the two, so it was 8 minutes each for 2 weeks at a time. So we constantly rotate in and out. But when we were at those OPs, that was in the northwest part of Kilo Company's AO, and that was just really heavy IED laden. So every time this patrol or the patrol bases would send out patrols, we knew like when they go between these buildings or down these roads, like someone's going to get hurt, someone's going to get blown up. It was just the reality of it. Fortunately, no one got killed up in that little corner. I think most of the casualties that were the KA that were taken on that one were outside of Kilo Company's AO, and I think there was one that was further south during one of the major operations. But there was just IEDs everywhere.
Yeah.
We had very restrictive rules of engagement. The dudes would have, someone be able to watch someone laying in an IED at one point have one of the Remington 700s that the Afghan snipers were supposed to be using, but, we would take it from them and use it ourselves, had the gun laid in on him and everything, and requested permission to take a shot, and it was denied. For whatever reason, yeah, this was a regular thing. For whatever reason, the command was very, very hearts and minds, maybe a little too heavy on the hearts and minds thing than they were like actually, doing the job and bringing everyone home.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, it's super. That's about as frustrating as it can get right there when you're sitting here like, dude, I'm being attacked or I'm seeing like a hostile act, but you are either not trusting what I'm seeing, you're not trusting that I'm telling you what's actually happening over the radio, or you're making like some judgment call to save your career rather than, I don't know, man. It was very frustrating. I know exactly what you're talking about, where you make that call where you're trying to get a strike in on a legitimate target. Yeah. This isn't, and for people that don't know, I don't know. Targeting in Afghanistan and stuff gets such a bad name because there are incidents that happen. Like, unfortunately, civilians do get killed and stuff like that. But I will tell you, every time I was there, on my 2 times there with doing fire support stuff, there was not a target that was struck that we didn't verify in multiple ways that they were legitimately enemy and that there was nobody around them. You know, it wasn't. There was only one time we were ever investigated, and that was because my air officer, when I was with 3-6 on our deployment to Marja, we were actually at FOB Marja, we did a strike. So we did a strike on these 2 guys that had put in an IED. There was an IED strike, and we watched them run away from the IED strike, come over to this field next to like a mud wall and start digging, and they were just digging like crazy. And so our air officer did a strike there. And then when we sent a team to go do the battle damage assessment, the BDA, the Afghans showed up with some like girl that was injured from something, but not from us, because we were watching it with 2 different ISR assets, like a UAV, like a Predator or Reaper, and then something else. And we told the platoon, the guys that we struck, were like, dude, we watched them roll them up in rugs and throw them in the tree line at this grid. And so just what my point is that it's not always what it seems. We don't know where that injured girl came from. Like, it was just something like that. Like, how did that even happen? Because we saw everything.
Yeah.
And getting denied, I don't know, getting denied to take a strike or take a shot or conduct a strike because of politics, basically, is very frustrating. For the guy like you or me or whoever that's on the end of the stick, you know, we're the ones that feel the ramifications. The battalion commander sitting in the COC saying, nah, let's not do that strike. He doesn't feel the ramifications because he's not the one out there under fucking, you know, getting shot at or getting whatever. Man, it just makes me mad to even talk about it, to be honest.
Yeah, trust me, man. I hear you. You know, and obviously I don't know what was going through the battalion commander or even the lieutenant's head at that time. I'm not sure who made that call not to let the guys take that shot.
Yeah.
But regardless, at some point you have to put the politics aside and say, you know what, we're here for a specific purpose. It's not to make friends.
Yeah, and you're watching someone put in an IED, and, you know, there's an argument where they're like, hey, that guy was forced to do it, or, you know, it was like, hey, if he doesn't do it, the Taliban's going to kill him or something like that. But that's something you find out after the fact, I guess. I don't know, man. It's a tough call. It's like, what am I supposed to do? Just watch them and place it and then mark it for EOD to come out and pick it up later, and then that guy just goes away and we never see him again, or what, you know? Like,
yeah, well, the other side of that is he just comes out every day and does the same exact thing, because that's pretty much what was going on.
Yeah.
This particular, you know, these couple blocks was every time we'd watch the platoon from Beirut, if I'm not mistaken, that's who it was. I think it was Beirut. Go down between these buildings down a particular road. There was going to be an IED that went off, whether they hit it just under the dirt or put it in a haystack. You know, we had guys getting hurt all the time. We just knew, like, watch the patrol across the road, go behind a building, boom, yep, okay, well, sit here and listen to the radio and see who got hurt this time. You know, and that was
crazy.
That was a regular thing. And I think it was 2 weeks into that deployment. One of my good friends, who's my roommate, pretty much the entire workup went through boot camp with him. We were both mortarmen. But for whatever reason, he got tasked out to one of the platoons. And for some ungodly reason, they decided to give this kid, this mortarman, the mine detector. You know, the little minesweeper beep, beep, beep thing.
Yeah.
And 2 weeks in, he stepped on one. You know, I was at the OP. And all of a sudden, I hear this boom. Look out, look south, and I can see the dust coming up. And I was like, oh, well, that was an IED. And all of a sudden, the radio starts going off, like, because I've got a radio up on post, and I'm listening to this, and I was like, oh my fucking god, like, that's Evan. Evan's hurt, and that was a rough night. That was a rough night for me, because I think it was like either that night or the next night that the chaplain came out, and that was like really the first word I got of, did he make it? Like, how's he doing? Kind of deal. But fortunately, he was okay. He lost his right leg below the knee, or just below the knee. His right arm was pretty mangled, but he survived. And he was there the day we got off the bus coming home, and he was actually at my wedding. He was one of the grooms at my wedding.
That's awesome.
Later in 2000, it was 2011, I guess at that point. But all that, it was just a series of bad decisions by the command, all along the way. At some point, we made some bad decisions.
Yeah. Does it feel like, could you notice a difference in the tone of the deployment after, like, the first casualty happened, the first injury or KIA happened?
I think it hit everyone differently.
Yeah.
Some guys who had already been to Afghanistan, like, knew this is a drill, this is just how it goes. Being, 25-year-old PFC at the time, it was like, it hit me a little bit harder. Just because this was, a kid that was younger than me. I think he was 19 at the time. But he was one of my good friends. And, I didn't get to hear from him. I didn't know what was going on. I knew one of my other best friends that I went through SOI with and boot camp with was with him on that patrol. So as soon as I was able to actually talk to my buddy Omar, we kind of tried to hash out, like, dude, what happened, yada, 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 and figure out, if there was anything more we could do. But the reality is we still had 90% of a deployment to go by the time we got to talk again. So.
Yeah, that's the thing you learn real quick is that, like, I don't know, when you're in or when you're training or even before you're in, you're like, man, I just want to get into the fight, like, it'll be cool to, like, I want to get in there and earn my stripes or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, like, someone gets hurt or something happens, and then the reality is like, man, this isn't fucking cool, you know. After a few close calls, it becomes even less cool, and it's like, dude, I just want to get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, there's a part of you that definitely gets used to it. Watching the IEDs go off, he's like, fuck, there's another one, whatever. Like, oh, there's someone shooting over there. There's tracers flying across the sky in the middle of the night. Whatever. Don't even bother calling it up. But I think the first time I got shot at was I was at the damn OP, and we had a castle wall. So the HESCOs, if you don't know what HESCOs are, it's just like a mesh wire lined with almost like felt. Yeah, like burlap or felt. And they fill these blocks up and with dirt, and it creates walls. So there's like a 6 or 7 foot HESCO, and then like a little 2 foot HESCO on top of that, which created like a castle wall. You could walk across the 8 foot HESCO, and you're pretty much covered to your knees kind of deal. But anyway, this is like all the way around this little 8-man OP. But I was walking across that HESCO. I had like 10 minutes left in my shift. I was like, God, I just want to get the fuck down from here. I'm tired. I've had enough Rippets and enough cigarettes. Like, I'm done. I need to get some rest. And all of a sudden, I heard this snap. And it's just like, it's exactly what you hear when you're down in the pits at the rifle range. It's just the clap of the round going over your head.
Yeah.
It was that second of, what the fuck was that? And then you hear the actual like boom from the rifle. I was like, oh shit, okay, let's someone just took a shot. So that was the first time. I couldn't figure out where it came from. Knew the general direction, but that was the first time. But that's the eye opener. It takes that first round snapping over your head or your friend getting hurt to really set in the realization that you're here now. Like this is happening. So
isn't it crazy though how when you come back from those deployments, you're like, fuck, man, I am so glad to be back. And then you get back for like 6 months or whatever, and you're like, man, I'm ready to go back on another one. I
wasn't even home that long. I was home for 2 weeks, and I was like, I'm ready to go back. And
yeah.
I'm ready to go back. All I want to do is go back. Like the job's not done. And every now and then, especially with the recent events that went on in Kabul and whatnot, all I could think about, like, for a certain period of time was just like, I should be there. Like, I should be there. I should be doing whatever I can to help out. You know, that's my brothers and sisters over there. I should be there, but I can't be. Like, that time of my life is done.
I think it was tough. I think it was tough for a lot of Marines to watch.
Yeah, it was, especially when those casualties actually came back. It was like, this is bullshit. This should never have happened. Like, anyone with a box of crayons, any PFC with a box of crayons could have come up with a better plan and prevented this shit. But that's neither here nor there. What's done is done as far as that goes.
So you went back to Marja with 2-2, right?
No, I went back to Marja with 3-9 again.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so I went to Marja with 3-9 from 2010 to 2011. Came back. Did the sniper indoc. I think we had to be back less than a month when I did that indoc. Was in the sniper platoon for all of 6 months before another unit. I think it was 2-9 disbanded, and a bunch of their school trained guys came over to 3-9. It was like, okay, well, everyone who's kind of like at the bottom of our stay platoon list has to go.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah. It was like, it was short lived, but you know what? It was kind of one of those childhood dreams. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go out and try to be a sniper. You know what?
Sure.
Didn't work out. It was, you know what? That's fine with me. But I
did you get to do some cool stuff though while you were with stay?
I learned more in the 6 months that I was with that platoon than I did the entire time in my Marine Corps career up to that point. I learned a lot. Some of the smartest dudes I've ever met were in stay or actual snipers, and their knowledge base is absolutely incredible. It was an experience, and it was a privilege to be able to work with them. So when that kind of all ended, I got shuffled over to PSD, Personal Security Detachment, for the BC and Sergeant Major for our next deployment coming up. And again, my buddy Omar, who I mentioned previously, had also gone out to the stay-in dock with me, made it, and then we both got shifted over to the Personal Security Detachment platoon right around the same time. I think he was there like a week before I was. But that was our that was pretty much our next assignment. We went back to Afghanistan to FOB Geronimo, which is kind of on the eastern side, the eastern outskirts of Marja. But being that we were PSD, we shuffled around throughout the entire AO. So we went back to FOB Marja. We went to Dwyer. We went down south to I don't even remember the names of these PBs anymore, cops, but we were all over southern Helmand province for that deployment.
How'd you like that? You know, were you, because like you just said, and for people that don't know, you know, the PSD, the Personal Security Detachment, you're basically the CO's driver / security, and wherever he wants to go, whenever he wants to go, you know, you have to be ready to go.
Yeah. So we were busy for short stints. We'd go out for 2 or 3 days at a time, you know, stop by different places. But then there were times where we'd go like 2 or 3 weeks. I think the longest stint we did was like 29 days or something like that, where we just sat on Geronimo and all we did was go to the chow hall, go to the gym, you know, get some random class from the platoon sergeant or platoon commander. But if I remember right, the reason we had that long extended stay on Geronimo was because we had one KIA that whole deployment. But it kind of shut everything down. Mainly because I think there was either bad intel or a lack of intel and planning going into that particular raid. So one of the other companies was raiding a compound, a Taliban compound, and it was a shit show from the start. they landed and immediately took contact from the compound. I don't know if they even actually got to the compound or not, but they had the birds trying to land back in to pick them up, and it was just too hot. It wasn't happening. And if I remember right, it was the kid's name was Lance Corporal Denier, but he was on the ground, prone, laid out, and took around pretty much through his collar right here, and it just went through his torso, and that was it. He just didn't make it. But as they were trying to egress and get back on the birds, I think it was actually the FAC took around through the back of the thigh. So the whole thing was just a mess. The raid was, if I remember right, the raid was pretty much a failure. And at that point, the battalion commander kind of just shut everything down. Like no one was going out on patrols. No one was leaving the wire. And that included, the BC and Sergeant Major. There was just nothing going on. Pretty much until they did that. They did Denier's his ceremony at Cop Hansen, which is just north of Fob Marja, if you remember right.
Yeah.
But yeah.
We moved from Marja up to Hansen. We moved the battalion CP from there when I was there in 2011.
Okay.
Yeah, man. I think I know that fact that got shot in the leg. Actually.
Yeah. Actually, the first time I went through TACP, the FAC, one of the FACs that I was going through that school with, he was actually on my team. Knew the pilot. Knew the FAC that took the round through the leg. But yeah, it was a weird little connection. So I kind of like stopped and had to look at him and be like, man, like I don't. Or he knew the guy. He was one of the guys who picked up the dudes. There was some weird connection where I had to stop and just like kind of take it all in. Like didn't want to like outwardly be like, dude, thanks for getting the guys out of there. But it was kind of one of those moments of like respect.
Yeah, for sure. I'm trying to remember who told me that story. I don't know who was the JTAC because I knew I think I knew one or two of the JTACs that was on that deployment. And I remember the FAC was saying, I met him in 29 Palms. We were at some exercise and I think he got shot and he was running towards the helicopter and he like fell down and got back up.
Yep.
And they were blowing him shit about it, but they didn't realize he had been shot in the leg. And that's why he fell. They're like, why are you falling down, you pussy, or something like that.
Yeah. That's the story. It's kind of a weird one.
Isn't it weird how it's like such a small community that this kind of stories get around?
The Marine Corps itself is super small, but when you start narrowing down to MOSs, like it gets even tighter.
Yeah.
The JTAC community is super, super small, and everybody somehow is connected. It's that whole like, what is it, like three points.
3 degrees of separation?
Yeah, 3 degrees of separation.
Yeah.
We all know each other some way, somehow. We're all interconnected. So it's really wild. Like I still run into guys all the time. And I'm like, like I was working with a MARSOC unit the other day, and they're like, oh, you were a JTAC. I was wearing one of my old Moto JTAC shirts, like just on the range. And the guy's like, oh, you were a JTAC? I was like, yeah, I was. I was like, do you happen to know Chung? He's like, oh yeah, I know Chung. Yeah, the slightly overweight Asian dude. I'm sure he'll see this. I'm like, oh yeah, I don't think he's deploying. I was like, no, he's kind of gotten held back. He's got some health thing going on. But yeah, it's a small community, and it just I run into friends all the time. I run into my old platoon sergeants all the time. One of them is here in Onslow County. He's the sheriff, and the other one is a SOI instructor now over here on the East Coast. So I see these guys all the time, and then I see guys that I was in 3-9 with or 2-2, and they're just on the ranges all the time. Even my drill instructor, the drill instructor I probably hated the most as a first sergeant out here now, and I've run into him before and actually had a couple good conversations with him.
I just did an interview with Tracy Offit, and I can't remember if I lost a lot of the audio from it. So we did basically 4 hours, and I don't remember if it was in the first half or second half when we were talking about it. But we were saying, I was telling him about I was in the fleet. I was a sergeant, and I was standing. We were having like a regimental formation or something like that at 10th Marines, and I was the guide in front of the battery, and I'm standing there, and everyone's kind of just hanging out, waiting for the actual formation to fully begin. Like you're already in formation, but nothing's going on. And out of the corner of my eye, I see my old senior drill instructor walk by. And immediately, I just start shaking. I was just like, oh, shit. Like, there he is. And I was just like, oh, man. And it was just like an unexplainable just start shaking of fear. I was like, holy shit, I can't believe that's the reaction I'm having 5 years later.
Yeah,
did you experience something similar, when the first time you saw one of your DIs in the fleet or outside?
I walked right past him, and then someone said something to me, and I kind of turned around and looked at him and said, I was like, oh, shit, First Sergeant Howard. It was then Sergeant Howard, but
yeah.
Sergeant. But yeah, it caught me off guard, shook his hand, and I've talked to him a few times.
That's cool.
Hopefully he and I get a little fishing trip together and go drink a couple beers together soon. So
tell some stories.
Yeah, First Sergeant Howard, if you see this, I'm still waiting on that fishing trip.
I actually had the weird experience to when I was in MOS school. That's kind of when Facebook was really becoming popular outside of the colleges. I think that's around the time they started opening it up to everybody.
Yeah.
And a kid that I was in MOS school when I was Motor T, we went to boot camp together, and he found one of our drill instructors on Facebook and was like messaging him. And he was like stationed at Camp Lejeune, and we were at Camp Johnson for Motor T school. And he invited us over for a cookout. He came down to the barracks and picked up like 3 of us that were all in the same platoon in boot camp. And we went over to his house. I was the only one that was 21, so I got to sit there and drink with him and stuff. The other guys didn't. But it was just funny kind of like telling his wife some of the shit he used to do to us. And he had like 20 bottles of Gain lined up against the garage wall. I was like, geez, man, you guys are thieves. All you DIs fucking thieving that and razor blades.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny. It's cool. It's interesting to hang out with someone like that because they had such a like crazy impact on your life. But I wonder for them, it's got to be just seeing one of your recruits. I don't know. Maybe it's pretty cool, but they do 70 dudes at a time. It's got to.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not as cool for them, I guess.
Yeah, who knows? I almost think of it as like, as a sergeant, and even as a corporal, like I had so many kids under my charge at one point or another. Most of them that were directly under me, I remember in some way, shape, or form. Remember their faces, their names, some interaction with them. But I can't imagine, every 3 months having, 70 or 80 new kids that I'm literally just, pushing through the process and making sure that they're not complete idiots. So who knows? That would definitely be a weird experience. I'll actually have to hit up some old friends who are drill instructors and ask them.
Speaking of like weird experiences, I don't know if this is a weird experience or not, but you went from 3.9 to 2.2, right?
Yeah.
What is within the infantry communities, units are very like, I don't know, they're very proud of their lineage and their own history and stuff. Is it hard to go to a different infantry unit? Do you catch a lot of shit, or are you too judgy when you show up? You're like, I can't believe they do it this way.
No, the kind of the beauty of it was 3.9 disbanded, and there were only so many places for us to go.
That makes it easy.
Yeah, so a lot of the guys that were in 3.9 ended up going straight over to 2.2.
Oh, okay.
I knew a bunch of them, which made it a lot easier. Like there wasn't any kind of like initiation phase, like welcome to 2.2. We're gonna fuck with you now kind of deal.
Yeah.
It was very laid back. The odd thing was I was, going from Mortarman to a little bit of time in a staple platoon to being in that personal security detachment, and then. At the time, 2.2, I think it was Easy Company. I think I got attached out to Easy Company. They didn't have a weapons platoon. They didn't have a mortar section at all. So it was just like, hey, you're going to be, squad leader for a rifle platoon. I was like, what the fuck do I know about being a rifleman, really? I knew the basics of patrolling and, generally how to lead and, whatnot. But it was kind of almost back to the basics for me, figuring that out.
Yeah.
Well, then that lasted all of like 2 months. So just as I'm starting to get the hang of being, a squad leader, they're like, hey, you're going to go over to golf company and we're starting up a mortar section. I was like, well, I haven't touched a mortar in 3 years. I'm not sure, what good I'm going to be. So I just got bounced around a lot. So then I was back to the drawing board, having to relearn a lot of those old skills, and having to figure it out mostly on the fly, especially in front of, junior Marines, privates and PFCs that are fresh to the fleet, and now you're in charge of them, and I haven't done this job in a couple of years. So
yeah, and they're expecting you to be the end all be all, like answer to all questions and stuff.
exactly. So I was having to hit the books again, and kind of relearn that job. But fortunately, there was a kid named Casey Kennedy, who kind of took point on the leadership position, at least for that mortar section. So we were almost like it was kind of like co-parenting the mortar section. He definitely had more experience. He had spent most of his time in an 81's platoon, if I'm not mistaken, and then he ended up in that 60s section. So he was more savvy and had spent more time on the moors than I had. But yeah,
That's good to have.
it worked out well. Between the two of us, we were always able to, fake the funk to a bare minimum that was passable for
Yeah.
me.
Now, when you were with 2-2, you guys went to Norway for cold response, which
Yeah.
seems like it's becoming a more popular thing now that like Afghan rotations aren't happening as much. It seems like more people are doing stuff like the Black Sea rotations and stuff like that. Can you talk about kind of what that was like for you guys, like going to Norway? Was it a wintertime thing?
It was a wintertime thing. Before that, we had gone to we did the winter training in Bridgeport. So that was a good time. That was kind of all work up for Norway. Bridgeport, if you aren't familiar with it, it's 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks of just up in the mountains at 7 to 10,000 feet, 11,000 feet of sea level. It's cold, it's snowy, and it's just absolutely the most miserable training you'll ever do. I think it took us 3 days to walk from lower base camp out to the actual training area. We spent 10 days in the training area and then hiked back. But the whole time it's just up and down the mountains. Well, Norway is much of the same. Fortunately, they didn't expect us to do all the same hiking and whatnot. We spent a lot of time in the BVs, I think that's what they're called. I don't even remember what the acronym actually is, but it's just like almost looks like a damn shoebox with tracks on it.
Oh yeah,
and
those are fun. I've driven one actually.
Yeah. Too bad they don't have any heat in the back.
Yeah,
but
they're cold.
Yeah, they're cold. So we spent a lot of time in the back of those. But Norway was a lot of fun. Norway was an experience. It was absolutely gorgeous, even in the winter.
Yeah.
It was interesting going in to see the caves that we have all this stuff, loaded into.
Pre-staged.
Yeah, pretty much pre-staged since Cold War, tensions with Russia, and all this shit's been just stashed in tunnels and mountains everywhere. And they just update everything that goes in there as the decades roll on. So now we're waiting for the next one, whatever comes next, and I'm sure they'll just keep updating all that stuff.
Yeah, that's something I'm sure a lot of people outside the military may not know. It's not classified or anything like that, but it's like pre-staged equipment in different countries. And not even just in countries, too. We have pre-staged equipment floating around in the oceans all the time, too, ready to go with stuff. So, that's pretty cool. Did you guys, while you were in Norway, did you get to see the Northern Lights and stuff?
We saw a little bit of the Northern Lights. The Northern Lights weren't what I expected, at least when I saw them. Mm-hmm. Someone came running out. I don't remember where we were, but we were staying in these big white tents, not even really like in a training area yet. I don't even remember what we were doing or where we were. I think this was just like the very basic, like still getting acclimatized to Norway. But yeah, I stepped outside. Someone was like, "Oh yeah, there's the Northern Lights," and looked up, and I was like, "Well, I see like a greenish glow in the sky, but not really dancing like I expected." But yeah, that was my experience with the Northern Lights.
Man, I've never heard anybody that's seen the Northern Lights that
I wasn't
sounded
impressed.
let down. You sound let down.
I was. Like I've seen like all the pictures and stuff online, and like all the videos of these dancing green and blue lights everywhere. You know, like it's a rave, and I was just that wasn't my experience, unfortunately.
Man, what a bummer, dude. We
Yeah.
were up in the in 2007, 2008 winter time frame. We were up in Bolio Lake Test Facility, which is in Alaska. It's like I think it's like an hour or so outside of Fairbanks, middle of nowhere. I mean, I think the closest little town is this little town called Delta Junction, which has like hundreds of people total. And legitimately, there's like a general store. You go in and they got furs for sale that trappers and and stuff. People are missing parts of their face and shit because they got caught out in the storms and stuff. Like this is legitimate, like hardcore Alaska. And so we were like, fuck yeah, we're gonna see the Northern Lights for sure out here because there's like no lights, no city lights, no nothing. But then we get out to this compound at Bolio Lake, and it's all these super bright spotlights all around the compound and can't see anything. And then eventually we got some liberty while we were there, and we took a duty van to Fairbanks, and we were getting ready to walk into a bar, and somebody's like, "Oh, look, the Northern Lights." And we're all like, "What?" And you could tell, obviously, we're all not from there because we stood outside this bar for like 10 or 20 minutes just staring at the sky. And it was just mind-blowing, man, just watching the colors like swing back and forth across the sky and it like change colors and shit. It's nothing that any movie, video, picture can ever do justice. Like it's one of those things that's just so, for me, it sucks that you didn't get to see it like I did.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where I'm like, holy shit, like this is something you got to see, in person at least one time in your life. It's, I don't know.
I would love to go back to Norway at some point and actually experience it outside the military. But realistically, I had a fantastic time in Norway. We did have some downtime. We did plenty of training up above the Arctic Circle. But when we had time, we went into Trondheim, which is one of the historical cities down there, and saw these 1,000-year-old cathedrals and
awesome.
Really got to see some of the history down there. It was a lot of fun, and the nightlife is pretty interesting also. But yeah, there's so much history in Norway. It's impressive.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, that's the best stuff, man. When you get to go out on like, the Mews suck. Obviously, going on a Mew, going on ships sucks. But those few times you get to go in a port somewhere and kind of experience another culture, another country, and see how they do stuff, and see how things are different and see how things are similar, even cross languages, cross different cultures and stuff. That's one of those great things that's about the military that a lot of people don't realize, having an opportunity like that. And the other thing too is a lot of people will take advantage of those opportunities. It's like, oh, we got Libo, let's get blackout drunk, and then you don't get to experience the culture. You don't even remember it because you got hammered before the night even really began and passed out.
Oh my God, yeah. So my one of my first experiences in the fleet, I got to go to Fleet Week up in NYC.
Oh my God, I've heard so many stories. I'm super jealous.
So one of the first nights I actually got to go out, I went out with one of my seniors who was a Lance Corporal at the time.
Real quick, do you want to explain what Fleet Week is for people that may not know?
Fleet Week is this, oh my gosh. So it's this wild, I think San Francisco or San Diego does one also?
San Francisco does one also.
Okay. So New York and San Francisco both have what's called Fleet Week, where the Navy will take at least one ship, loaded up with its sailors and loaded up with Marines, and go set up port pretty much in downtown New York City, like, right on the river there, like just outside, like you can see the Statue of Liberty if you're standing on the deck of the ship. But then you're there in downtown. So that's what Fleet Week is, and it's just a week of parades and demonstrations. I think it's during Memorial Day, usually during Memorial Day weekend or during that week at least. But they'll fly Ospreys in and do landing demonstrations and whatnot. We'll go to parades and ceremonies.
There's charity things too,
There's all kinds of charities, and for the most part, it's just it's overall it's a fantastic time.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, Fleet Week's a blast. One of my seniors, one of the first nights we went out, one of my seniors got just absolutely blackout drunk, and we were running late trying to get back to the ship. So I'm trying to drag this idiot. We've got like another half mile to go. I'm trying to get this idiot across the street to the actual port, and he's just drunk and screaming and throwing his ribbons, like, because we're in our Charlies, our dress blue Charlies at that point, if I'm not mistaken, and he's just tossing shit everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it was even Deltas. I think it was Deltas. It was short sleeves at the time. But he's throwing his ribbons, throwing his cover, his hat, and just generally making a scene. When all of a sudden, the battalion commander and the sergeant major happened to roll up to the same corner that we were on, trying to cross the street to get back to the ship.
Oh, great.
And this kid is still being a belligerent idiot. Screaming, drunk, stumbling. I was like, oh my God. And we're walking back to the ship, like right in front of the BC and sergeant major, and he's still just stumbling, tossing shit, screaming at me. So finally I got so irritated with this kid. Like, I snatched up my senior. Like, I grabbed him by the shirt and lifted him up and was like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? Like, screaming at him, like right in front of the BC and sergeant major, like grabbed his ribbons and started dragging his ass back to the ship. Eventually got him back on ship and put him in his rack. But because I was his libo buddy, I assumed that I was going to get all my libo canned because of him. So I thought, like, after day 2, like, my time and my fun, at least in New York City, was done. Fortunately, that wasn't the case. He got in trouble, and I didn't get in any. I think I got by the sergeant major for snatching him up and screaming at him. But that was about
I bet a lot of people get in trouble during Fleet Week. That's got to be one of those times where, sorry for people watching on YouTube if my camera moves. My dog's rolling around, bumping into the tripod. I apologize. But Fleet Week is one of those, from what I've been told, it's just you get off ship in your uniform, and you have to wear your uniform, right? Like, that's a requirement.
It is a requirement.
And everywhere you go, it's just like free drinks being thrown at you, free food, free whatever. And I knew guys that would go on leave during Fleet Week and bring their blues and go up to New York City on leave. That way, they didn't have to do what you guys did on ship and be back at like midnight or whatever time it was. They got to stay out. Yeah, they got to stay out in uniform past, and then just continue partying the night away.
Yep, that would definitely have been the way to do it. Cinderella curfew is not the way to do it.
It's miserable. That's the worst part, when you're watching the clock and you're like, damn it, we got to get back to the ship. We have this much time. Where's so-and-so?
If you are a single guy and you are in the Marine Corps, whenever Fleet Week is, find out when it is. Take that week off and go up there on your own. All right? Don't go with your unit, or try to avoid going with your unit, but go up there on your own. Take the week off. Plan on just being intoxicated the entire time and having a blast. You'll get in everywhere for free. You probably won't pay for a single drink. I don't think I did the entire 8 or 10 days we were there. But yeah, Fleet Week is a fantastic experience overall.
I've heard nothing but good things. It's one of those things I really wish I would have gotten to experience in my time in the Marines, but I didn't get that opportunity. So
yeah,
probably not a bad thing though, because I was married all the way up until the end. It would have only been really fun, I guess, if I would have gone at the very end of my career. So
yeah, I was dating my now wife at the time. I still managed to have a good time, just not too much fun. I enjoyed playing wingman for a couple of friends who definitely had a blast.
Yeah.
Leave it at that.
That's good stuff, man. So at what point during, you got to go to Norway, you got to go to Fleet Week, you got to do all these different things. You did a couple deployments to Afghanistan as an infantryman. What made you decide you wanted to do a lap move?
So after I think it was, I had been in 2-2 like for 6 months at this point, I think. And finally I was just like, you know what, there's no planned trips back to Afghanistan. Like, we're not going to Afghanistan anymore. We're not doing, Syria, Pakistan. We're not going anywhere. It's just all turned into, the BSURF, the Black Sea Rotational Force, the MEUs, the Marine Expeditionary Units, and, trips to Okinawa, Japan, and Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want that. I want to go, either I want to go back to Afghanistan, or I just want to do something different, something more interesting, and maybe stay out of the field a little bit more. So I was over it at that point. I was just done being in the field constantly.
And what drove you to like seek out like 0861?
Oh, I went to the career planner. I was like, hey, like, what do you think would be a good trip for me? He's like, oh yeah, well, you're a Mortarman, right? I was like, yeah. He's like, you know how to call for fire? Yeah, I know how to call for fire. Cool. You should go be an 0861. Those are the Arty Scout observers. All I do is call for fire. I was like, sweet. That sounds like a sweet gig. What I'm going to do for the rest of my career is kind of sit on a hill and call in bigger explosions than I have been for the past, 6 years up to that point. So I thought that's what my career was going to be for however much longer it lasted. And that was it. I was like, hey, yep, this is what I'm going to do. So I submitted all the paperwork, and everything came back. Yep, you're approved. Like, if I remember right, I think it was, guy's name was Knaus. I don't remember.
Oh yeah, Master Knaus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Finally called me, and like, because at that point, like, I wanted to stay in, but like all my eggs were kind of like in the lap move basket, so I hadn't heard anything back, and I was really starting to stress. I was like, well, fuck, like if I'm getting out, I need to know so I can start making plans, like have an exit strategy, or I need to start planning ahead for what's coming next. And so when he finally called me and said, hey, yeah, you've been accepted, like, no one's told you yet. I was like, no, nobody's told me yet. Like, he's like, oh, well, I guess that explains why I haven't gotten an email or a call from you, accepting all this. I was like, well, yeah, I guess so. But yeah, when I finally got the orders and everything, it was like, hey, yeah, you're going to go out to Camp Pendleton, like, once you finish the schoolhouse. And at the time, my wife and I were really kind of set on staying at Lejeune. We had gone house hunting, like, we're ready to put in offers on a house, and really wanted to like start settling down and just start living a semi-normal life. Well, when the orders came back, it was like, hey, yep, you're going to Pendleton, and I kind of fought that one a little bit. I was like, I really don't want to go, like, to the point where 2-2 actually did an NCO PME trip up to Quantico and up to DC. And while I was there, I went in and actually saw face-to-face the Master Sergeant Knaus, who's in charge of all the lap moves, or the 0861 community in general. And was like, look, man, like, I understand, like this is completely your decision. I would really, really like to stay at Lejeune. I don't want to leave. He's like, yep, well, that's exactly why we're sending you. We don't want you growing roots. And that was it. So
yeah. So
that was the end of that conversation. So we went through the schoolhouse and everything, ended up in Pendleton. But yeah, that was pretty much the reason that I decided to lap move. There was just nothing left for me on the infantry side. I'd done everything I wanted to do, pass, fail, or otherwise. Like that time was just done for me. I was pushing 30 years old at the time, and was just not able to keep up with the 18 and 19-year-old kids anymore on the 03 side. So
did you go to school first, or did you go to 11th Marines first?
I went to school first. So I went to the schoolhouse, we ended up getting in a lot of trouble while we were at the schoolhouse, both at Fort Sill and when we were on Coronado. Fort Sill was it for those who aren't familiar. Fort Sill is in Oklahoma. Or is it in Oklahoma?
Yeah, it's Oklahoma.
Yeah, it's Oklahoma. Fort Sill in Oklahoma, and while we were there, that's where you learn just your basic artillery call for fire. Artillery call for fire is supposed to be the exact same as mortar call for fire. However, the arty community is much more anal about every single word and that goes,
Yep.
yeah, every single word and line that goes into that call for fire. So it was kind of a slap in the face coming from where I had been. Everyone talks about that infantryman's arrogance, and I definitely suffered through that the first 2 years of my lat move, both at the Scout Observer Schoolhouse and then the first time I had to go through the TACP Schoolhouse.
Can you explain also, because a lot of people may not realize that for a mortar FO, the mortar forward observer, it's not formal training. You're not going to a school for that. It's someone within your section teaching you how to do call for fire, and then you get designated to be the FO, correct?
Generally, yeah. They try to take the least retarded one of the group and make him the FO, which is what it comes down to more often than not everywhere you go in the Marine Corps. However, yeah, it's very informal. Like, hey, these are the basic lines. Like, caller ID, your warning order, observer ID, the target location, and then your third transmission, which is the target description, and rounds requested, etc. So you get the very gist of it as a mortarman. Some guys are much better at it than others. Some guys get to go through like the JFO schoolhouse. So they have that background and understand like this is what it's supposed to look like. But as just an infantry mortarman who got bounced around a lot and never really got that formal training, it was definitely a kick in the nose when it was like, hey, it has to be done this way. You have to say over. You have to say out. And I think I almost failed my very first call for fire, or at least live call for fire from the arty schoolhouse because I didn't say over a single time through my transmissions. So through all 3 or 4 of my transmissions, I never said it once and almost failed because of it. So it's a very nitpicky community.
Artillery is the most nitpicky community. I mean,
with good reason, but yeah,
it is. These rules are written in blood is real. Like everything is done for a certain reason. Because if you do it the way they teach you, it's mathematically impossible to not hit the target. If you do your basic, everything the right way, then you're doing it the fastest. You're getting all the information out there the quickest. You're saying it the way that we've done it a million times, so many times that we've refined it down to the most precise way of saying it to be, clear and concise about what you're asking for. Absolutely. And training for those that aren't artillery people, if you mess up comms on the radio, you're going to get an earful from probably the other end of the radio and the people that are around you. Like, you idiot. Yeah. Like, I can't believe you said over instead of out, or you said, like whatever.
Yeah. You got these two things backwards where it should have been this first and then this next, or everything. Like, the guy on the other end of the radio is going to tell you about it. And then, the guy over here is going to tell you about it who's standing right next to you listening. And then, the retarded PFC over there is going to be giggling in the background because you fucked up. But,
I'm honestly surprised they don't send more mortar FOs over to like artillery to get some like formalized, observer training, or through JFO or something. I know there's limited seats for like a formal school like JFO, but it's not a hard job, but you got to figure out how to do it. That target location in under 2 minutes, all that stuff, it just all kind of come. I don't know. It's such a great job. And then when you go become a JTAC like you did later on, it's not as strict. Like the information, what is strict is like the key points that you have to get across. Yeah. But you could be more kind of laid back in your communications. Some people
much more informal.
It's way more informal, but some people take too much liberty with the informalness of it and become very bro on the radio rather than being like quick and concise. To try to get the attack on and stuff like that. So, so you didn't do any deployments, right? As a forward observer.
Not as a forward observer, no. So when I finished up the schoolhouse, both at Fort Sill and Coronado, I went straight to 11th Marines Regiment, headquarters element there, where I had Rooster. What was his actual name? I can't remember. His call sign was Rooster, or at least his nickname. Root. Master Sergeant Root.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But yeah,
I know the name. I think we've met once or twice.
Yeah, Root was there, and then Master Guns Munoz was there, and so those were kind of the guys that I was under for the foreseeable future. But what was interesting was like I was no longer like everything that I learned at the past two schoolhouses was just out the window. It was like, hey, yeah, you're not calling for fire here, man. You're approving fires. I was like, well, how do I do that? It's like, oh, you just draw lines on this map and put pins in the map and make sure that where the air is doesn't cross where the arty is, and if it does, make sure that the air is above those max ords of the artillery or whatever else you got going on. Just your job is to deconflict everything. Make sure that no one's shooting anyone else and that there's no air flying through, where big bullets are flying through the big sky.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, that's kind of how it was. So when I did my lat move, they sent me to 10th Marines first. I didn't go to school first. I went to 10th Marines and did basically OJT for like 8 months. I think I was maybe 10 months.
Wow.
I was at 10th Marines for like 10 months before I even went to MOS school. Well, maybe it was like 8 months before I went to MOS school. So I actually had a pretty good kind of handle on. They had me doing. I was like chiefing a field exercise before I'd even gone to MOS school, out of necessity, not because I'm that great or anything.
Yeah.
The chief wasn't there, and they had me do it. I felt lost as shit. My buddy Wilson kind of saved me. He came in. He's more experienced and came in and kind of was helping me along. But when I showed up, Gunny Klein was my chief at the time.
Okay.
And he was like, he's like, what do you think you're going to be doing here? And I was like, call for fire and be the link between infantry and artillery. And he's like, yeah, that's a lance corporal's job. You're a sergeant. He said the same thing. He's like, you're going to be working in the Fire Support Coordination Center doing approval. And I was like, oh, fuck, that sounds lame. Like that doesn't sound cool at all. And it's not as cool, but it's fun. I mean, it's still a good gig, and it gives you like a really, being a fires chief and doing that a little bit, that experience. I did a deployment as a fires chief with 3-6 and kind of getting that experience doing deconfliction and seeing the different parts of the targeting process and the approval process, I think only made me a better JTAC, because then I kind of got, I got how it all works. I saw the big picture because I worked in the COC, working on targeting and approving fires and that kind of stuff. So I think it was, although not what I wanted, it was probably the best thing that could have prepared me, for that follow-on going to Tactical Air Control Party School and becoming a JTAC.
Yeah, I wish I had that experience. It was like I said, it was a very harsh learning experience coming from the 03 side, which is very loose and relaxed with its call for fire, to the RD side, and then learning the naval guns and everything else it was really hard to swallow my 03 pride from time to time, especially once I got to TACP. Was rough, and I think it showed. The fact that I had to go through twice, I think kind of exemplifies.
I didn't know that. You went through it twice?
I went through twice. I got all the way. So the first time I went through, I struggled. I struggled bad. But I got to the very last sim and just completely blew it. Had no real clue what was going on. Didn't have a full understanding of the ordnance. And in that particular case, it was GBU 54. I didn't understand that it was both GPS guided or laser guided. But yeah, it was. I blew that one out my ass.
That's tough, man. That's a tough thing to do, is sit there and fuck up a control, because
it was bad.
Everyone around you, it's like, I'm sure you had kind of the same experience, but all the instructors have years of experience either being JTACs or being pilots, and stuff like that. And everyone is tough but fair. You know what I'm saying? I think it's one of those communities where it's like, hey, man, we're not going to fuck with you about the bullshit. Like, I don't care if you got a haircut on Monday or Wednesday or whatever. Within reason, obviously. I showed up and one of my TSP instructors had fucking like long ass sideburns. This major, he was a major, and he had to get told to he actually had to get told to get a haircut. But they don't care about that bullshit because they want your sole focus to be on knowing your job, knowing your ordnance, knowing your platforms, your different aircraft, understanding how you can employ each weapon system, and in different situations, when's best to go with rockets rather than like a GBU, a guided bomb. It's this, even though the sims are sims, and when we're talking about a simulated like computer training, basically for those that may not, it's like almost like video game Call for Fire. It's still fucking stressful, and it's only to prepare you to go out and drop live bombs, and it is what it is. It's tough.
Yeah, it was rough, and it was a weird experience the first time through too, because I showed up like expecting every schoolhouse that I had known up to that point was like, yes, we're going to show up at 05:30 in PT for an hour and a half, and then go do, shower, change over, eat, yada yada yada. This wasn't. It wasn't like that. It was, hey, show up at 07:30 or 08, whatever the case was, and we're just going to do death by PowerPoint for the first week. For those of you who don't know what death by PowerPoint is, it's just an entire day, from sunrise to sunset pretty much, or at least your entire workday is just sitting in a classroom, listening to PowerPoint, pounding coffee, and nicotine to try to stay awake and stay focused on all the information that's just being shotgun blasted into your brain. But yeah,
and it's all important shit too. It's not, none of it is stuff that you can really not worry about. It's all stuff that you need to take into account every time you go out.
Exactly. So it's every little piece of it is important, but at the same time, you'll hear the phrase once or twice. Well, if all of it's important, then none of it's important. It's like, okay, so what's really important here? What's the main takeaways? And for anyone who hasn't gone to TACP or is thinking about going through TACP, know the ordnance and know all your required readbacks. Know your ordnance. If you don't understand what the ordnance is, you need to get in the book and figure it out and understand how it works.
Yeah, for sure. Because how can you come up with a good game plan and justify your weapon selection for your target if you don't even know what the weapon is?
Yeah, well, that's what bit me in the butt the first time I went through. So
you never made it to the live portion?
No, the first time I never even made it to the live portion. It was that last sim, and I blew it. Where they just don't give you any heads up of what's coming, and it's just like, yep, you're gonna pass fail.
You're lucky you got to go back a second time.
Oh, it was a godsend, and considering the circumstances, throughout all of this, leading up to that first time going to TACP, I was under investigation for hazing. So that was a whole nother thing that I was trying to get past and move on with my career. And then when I failed TACP the first time, I assumed that was it. I was like, that's it. Like, there's no way I'm getting away with this.
What was going through your mind when you failed and you knew you were going back to the unit and had to be like, hey, I didn't make it through the course?
Oh, I felt shame. Like, that's the only word to describe it, was shame, embarrassment, and shame. Like I said, I had that infantryman's arrogance coming into it, and I think it shined through to my detriment, severe detriment. And coming back to 11th Marines, knowing that I had, really screwed the pooch on that one, was rough to swallow.
Yeah.
So,
dude, I can't imagine.
Yeah, that was tough. And then somehow someone saw fit to go ahead and send me over to 111, where I might get more experience, like firsthand experience with JTACs and basic FOs before going back or simply ending my career there, whatever the case was going to be. So at that point, it was, then Staff Sergeant Pittigoy, now now Gunny Pittigoy, and a couple others that kind of took me under their wing and showed me the light, really.
Mm-hmm.
And they were kind of my mentors at that point, and helped me get through everything and figure things out, and really sat down and worked through all my issues. And then when I went, so I failed TACP. Then they decided, okay, well, let's go back and send you through, because I requested this. I was like, why are you sending me from, like, I'd gone from the FO schoolhouse to TACP within like 4 or 5 months.
Oh yeah, that's fucked up. That's setting you up for failure.
Yeah, I mean, they put me through the primer and everything like that, but it was just like trying to grasp all the concepts and really understand what was going on around me was just not happening. So they kind of pushed me through the primer, shoved me into TACP because they were hurting so bad for JTACs, and it all fell apart.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's tough, dude.
Yeah, at that point it was decided, we want to send you back to TACP. I was like, time out. Like, let me get my bearings back. Please send me to JFO. Let me get the basics down first. Let me, it's that whole concept of brilliance in the basics. If you can master the basics, you can, spout off from that in any direction you want, as long as it makes tactical sense. Well, that was my thinking. I wanted to go through the JFO schoolhouse. For those of you who don't know, it's the Joint Forward Observer or Joint Fires Observer schoolhouse. So your job is to then not only do the artillery and naval gun call for fire, but you start getting introduced into the air piece of it. So fixed wing and rotary wing, and the ordnance that goes with it.
Yeah, the JFO works as an observer to if a JTAC is working like a large area of operations, they will just work out of the command center so that they're centrally located. And these JFOs, these Joint Fires Observers, will be out on the battlefield providing target location and descriptions and stuff like that, feeding it back to the JTAC so that he can conduct the attack. Yeah. It was when I was at 10th Marines, I didn't go through JFO. I just went to TACP school, but a lot of the guys that did both, a lot of them said JFO was harder for them than TACP school. Because it's a lot of the same stuff. It is a lot of the same information. Like, that's where you start to get kind of your bearings as far as like what's all this this fixed wing ordnance, what's the difference between all the different Hellfires off the rotors and everything else. That's where you start building your foundation to go to TACP. So having that foundation, which I still barely passed that piece of it, but what you gain from actually graduating that schoolhouse gets you ready for the next step for that TACP, that big jump up to like controlling aircraft and having a good understanding. Of course, the second time I went to TACP, then I was just making a whole new round of mistakes. I understood the ordnance and how everything worked, but then I would make stupid mistakes. Like, I would forget to get the full check-in from the aircraft. I would forget to tell him that he was the only aircraft on station, or his flight was the only section on station. So then I would fail for that. I was like, the simple safety stuff.
Yeah, the simple safety stuff that will bite you in the ass. So my process appeared good, but it was just all the little nitpicky stuff that will instantly fail you that got me that time around. And I still barely got through that, and still barely got through the actual live portion. But once I got through all that, like, everything just kind of seemed to fall into place. I got much better at my job, and I had good people. Paul Smith, again, was one of the guys over me who kind of took me out. Bless you.
Thank you.
And really showed me the ropes of how all this is supposed to work. In fact, one of the first times I went out with Paul Smith, it was one of my last controls of this outing on San Clemente Island, and everything was so perfect. I was doing Type 1 bomb on target with the ISLID, and I had a section on. They were coming in like everything was perfect. Like went through the whole 9-line, readbacks, everything was textbook. And then as I'm keying the radio to give these guys the cleared hot, my radio dies.
Oh.
I was like, I'm sitting there
horrible.
with the radio. I hear, and I just I'm like, cleared hot. Boop, and the radio, I'm like, no. I'm like screaming at the radio. Fortunately, the guy who was behind me was listening to all this and had a radio on and went ahead and gave him the cleared hot.
Nice.
I was like, I couldn't believe this had just happened. Like everything, I finally got it right. Finally got it right. And all that rightness had just been shitted on by my damn radio.
Yeah. But, I mean, that's something...
Fortunately, everyone was understanding. Was like, look, man, like, you're good. That's your control. Like, the only thing you didn't technically give was the cleared hot. But everything else was by the book. So we're good.
Yeah, and plus that's one of those things where it's like, oh, man, like, it's not like you fucked up. I mean, if you had not op-checked the radio and it failed the first time you tried to use it, that's one thing. But you're actively using it and suddenly it dies.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why you do have a backup and stuff like that ready to go. But which someone there did. And what's worse though is when you fuck up on something that you should have known, and that it's like, dude, for me, something like that, I would beat myself up for weeks, or if it was like something that was like I felt like was a major mistake, months, if not longer. I would sit there and just randomly come up and be like, "Oh, remember that time you did that, idiot? Fucking why would you?" Like, God, I'd just be like, "Damn, I'm an idiot," and I did it in front of all my friends.
You will find yourself calling yourself an idiot as a JTAC more often than not. Like you look back and you're like, that was a stupid mistake. Stop being retarded. Like telling yourself, don't be retarded. Don't be stupid. Stop doing that.
Those first few months, man, when you're going through your designation phase and you're trying to it's like, so for those that don't know, the way it works is you go to TCP school, you go to the Tactical Air Control Party school, and then there's where you learn how to become a JTAC. By the end of it, you are a certified JTAC, a Joint Terminal Attack Controller. That doesn't mean you can go out and drop bombs, though, because now you have to go back to your unit and your JTAC evaluator at your unit, or the WTI, which is the Weapons and Tactics Instructor. You have to go through a syllabus with them where you do some simulated controls, some live controls, daytime, nighttime. We're going to integrate artillery. We're going to have all this stuff, and they're going to turn the pressure up on you because they're the ones that are the final say. When you get done all these different tasks that they have for you, they sit down with the commanding officer and go, okay, this guy is now a designated JTAC, sign off on the paperwork. That means he can go out and drop bombs on his own with zero supervision.
Yep.
And it's tough at first, man, when you're first trying to get you're out of school and you're trying to do it in the fleet. My first control at 10th Marines, or my first time on the OP, I had the air officer is a F-18 guy. I think his call sign was Tabby. And he's like, all right, Kramer, you got 2 sections of F-18s, a section of Cobras, and a fucking Prowler checking on station in like the next 30 minutes or something like that. And this is all live. This is all out at what's that fucking that island off of Camp Lejeune that's covered in mosquitoes? You just sit out there.
That's San Clemente.
No, off Camp Lejeune.
Oh, off Lejeune? An island off Camp Lejeune?
Yeah, not off Camp Lejeune. Anyways, there's a bombing area there that
we talk about, like Browns Inlet, Browns Island, or whatever it is.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Anyways,
I know what you're talking about, yeah.
There's a bombing range that we were using. But anyway, that was all live. And for those that don't know, in school, when you're like learning, you get one section, and when you don't know anything, you feel overwhelmed by this one section. Now which is 2 aircraft. One section is 2 aircraft. Now I've got a bunch of aircraft, including a Prowler, which is a electronic warfare, and I've never worked with before.
What the hell do I do with that?
I told him, I was like, sir, I've only ever controlled one section at a time, right? And he's like, yeah, you'll figure it out. I'm like, all right, here we go. And I'm just drenched with sweat by the end of it.
Figure this out.
Yeah, and then I did all right on that first during the day, and then my first mistake was that night. No, that wasn't my first mistake. I think it was maybe after my deployment. I did a bad control with the ISLID, and that's something that always stuck with me. I think I've talked about it on the podcast before. I did a bad control with the ISLID, which is for those that don't know, it's the laser that we use to mark targets at night that you can only see with the night vision goggles. And the pilot was coming in, And he was a new pilot. He had never bombed that area before. Like when I asked him if he was familiar with the area, he said no. And I was like, oh shit, this dude's brand new. Because this is where all the squadrons bomb. And he called, like, when I said visual or called visual tally, meaning, hey, I could see the friendlies and I could see the target. Yep. He's like tally friendlies, visual the target, blah blah blah. No. And I go cleared hot, and my air officer jumped on. He's like, abort, 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 and he looked at me and he's like, what the fuck are you doing? And I mean, everyone could hear it, and I was like, oh, I feel like such a piece of shit. Know.
That's the problem.
He's like, what? And what it was is this guy had come around twice, so he had done this attack. He was coming around, and the first time, everything was all ready, everything was good to go, and when I gave him cleared hot, he forgot to take his weapon off safe. So he's like, yeah. I'm waiting for guns off an F-18, and nothing. And I'm like, hey, say reason for no drop, and he's like, oh, it's, we're going to come back around. Forgot to take the weapon off safe, coming back around for another pass.
Yeah, requesting a reattack.
It was like the second or third pass, and it was like so many things had gone wrong that was just like the cherry on top.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, and for months, many months, if not over a year, I'd be like, God, I'm an idiot. Why did I say clear and hot when he said tally friendlies? Like, I'm an idiot.
Yep.
Yeah, but that's the stuff, man.
One of the things that almost got me failed at the second time I went through TACP, at the live portion, the dude was, I think it was a section of rotors, and they didn't have any ordnance. So they were still holding in their HA, or moving from the HA to BP, and I said continue dry, and that's a no-no.
Yeah,
I didn't know it at the time, but obviously continue dry is supposed to be like substituted for cleared hot because they're not actually dropping anything.
You're notionally shooting something.
They're notionally shooting, but I was like, yeah, continue. Like instead of just saying continue, I said continue dry, like with the implication being, yes, I understand you have no ordnance. Mm-hmm. So that was one of my little flubs, and it almost got me dropped. It was like, hey man, like you've had some issues already. Like we could and probably should drop you for this. And I was like, oh gosh, please don't, like, give me another chance and I'll get it right.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we win again. And,
you're lucky, man. I don't know anybody that got to go to TACP school twice, especially if I've seen guys that maybe messed up one of their live drops, because at the end you have to get 3 live drops. Yeah. I've seen guys that have messed up one of those and they'd bring them back for the next class just to do the live portion again, but never like the entire school.
Yeah. I don't know. I've gotten so lucky throughout both my Marine Corps career and now as a civilian. Either it's good vibes, good juju, whatever you believe in. Like something has been looking out for me from time to time, or it's just pure dumb luck. And I don't know which it is. I'm not particularly religious, so I won't speculate. But yeah, I've gotten really lucky at every turn.
That's good stuff, man.
Yeah, made a few good decisions along the way, and I've had support of a lot of good friends, good family, wife, kid, and my parents, and it's just been it's been a roller coaster, but it's been a hell of a ride, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. Like I said, something out there has just been. I've been in someone or something's good graces. For a long time now. Well, eventually that's going to run out.
Maybe, you never know, man. Just keep doing good stuff. You know what I'm saying? Before we wrap this up, let's talk about your transition, and maybe give some advice to people that are on their way out the door, and you're also a contractor now. You're working at Camp Lejeune, yes. Working with the ranges and stuff with some of their targeting systems. Do you want to talk about one? Some general advice for transitions, kind of what your mindset was during that whole period. And then 2, maybe some advice for people that are looking for a job in like that contracting world, not overseas contracting, security contracting, but, facilitating like range time, like you're doing here at Camp Lejeune.
So, I work for a company called Marathon. I'm not going to plug the company here or anything or, promote them. I will say that, it's a very good company to work for, and I've enjoyed my time here. With that being said, when you are getting ready to get out, pay very close attention to steps and taps, whatever it's called now, your transition readiness.
TRS.
Yeah, TRS. Pay very close attention in TRS. When you do apply for a job, ensure that you tailor your resume to that specific job that you are trying to get. Don't just throw out a general resume to everyone and everything. Because frankly, like, that would not have landed me the job that I have now. And in the job I have now, that's a lot of what we get when we do hire people or are looking to hire people. It's just resumes of, truck drivers and, general mechanics and whatnot. And it's like you don't fit the bill at all, like based off your resume. But maybe if you had tailored that resume a little bit more to say, hey, yes, I have a mechanical background or a electronics background, computers, yada yada, wireless communications, whatever it may be, like then the management or the actual people who are hiring will take a much more closer look at your resume. But tailor your resume to the job that you're trying to get. When I showed up to the interview, I understood that it was going to be a longer interview and that was going to be a group interview. What I did was go out and buy clothes to look the part. I showed up in cargo pants. I showed up with Merrell boots that I had just purchased from the MCX and had full intention of returning if the interview didn't go well.
That's funny.
But yeah, the interview that I did for the company I work for now ended up being closer to 5.5 hours, a 5.5 hour group interview, working group interview, and then just a I guess it'd be 1-on-2, myself being the one and two being the site manager and the I guess the director of operations for the U.S. at the time. And I made a good impression out of the 15 or 16 other people that were there, and I was the guy that they called back. They offered me the job initially out in Camp Pendleton. At the time, I had what I thought was another job. I guess it was another legitimate job offer on the table, so I declined at the time and said, "Hey, I'm not sorry. Like, I thought I was, hoping to go back to Camp Lejeune, hoping to go back to the East Coast, but this interview was on the West Coast, and that's where they expected that I was going to work." I said, "Thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to decline at the time." Well, fortunately, they called me back 2 weeks later and said, "Hey, would you be interested in going out to Camp Lejeune?" I said, "Yes, I would take that. Same pay, same benefits, etc." Sold. So my advice is be smart about what you do. Don't throw all your eggs in one basket. Make sure when you apply for these jobs, just be smart about it. Don't necessarily tell the guys that you're interviewing with that you have other job offers on the table, because that kind of screwed me out of another job that I was kind of hoping to get. Actually, I would have been it was a job in Las Cruces, New Mexico. I would have been teaching Air Force pilots how to do close air support out of White Sands, the testing area over there. But that fell through when they found out that I had another job offer. So it was kind of like, look, I chose you guys because this is what I wanted to do with my career, and then you guys are kind of shutting me down here. So I had to go back and call my company, my current employer, back and be like, "Hey, are you guys still looking? Like, shit kind of fell apart, yada yada yada."
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, it was this big ordeal. So number one, don't throw all your eggs in one basket. Keep looking for a job until you sign a contract with someone, an employment contract. Don't stop looking. Don't assume you have anything already set up. Even if you plan on going to college, going home to just work the old job you had before you joined the military, don't count on that shit. Make sure you put yourself out there and get more than one, get don't stop until you get the acceptance letter. Is basically what it comes down to.
For sure.
But that's my advice. And when you go to these interviews, or before you even get to the interview, make sure you research the company that you're interviewing with. I've had a couple of guys now, a couple of close friends, who interviewed with companies, and they were turned down because when they showed up for the interview, whether it was teleconference or in person, they just didn't know shit about the company itself. They had all the qualifications. The qualifications were fine. The company was obviously interested in them because they wouldn't have bothered doing an interview with them at all if they weren't.
Yeah.
But when you don't know anything about the company, when you don't do your research about the company, when you don't have any intelligent questions for them, they just kind of write you off and say, yep, you're not what we're looking for. And
yeah, for sure. Definitely, man. Yeah, go check out the website, check out their social media, do all that stuff, just to get a vibe of. Plus, I feel like having been in the military, when you're looking for that next job outside of the military, you probably want something that you want to enjoy doing.
Oh, yeah.
So why would you not look into the company? That's kind of the question that people should think about. Like, why am I not looking into? Because every company has a different culture and stuff. And some of the places that are available or that are hiring might not be somewhere you actually want to work. You show up and you're like, shit, this isn't what I thought it'd be.
Absolutely. And don't assume because you did, 4 years, 8 years, 10 years in the military, or even, retired as a warrant officer. We've had that incident before. Don't assume because you did any of those things or you spent X number of years in the military that someone's going to want to hire you based strictly off your veteran status. It doesn't work that way. There's enough people out there now,
millions of veterans, literally.
Literally millions of veterans. You are back to being Lance Corporal Schmuckatelli, and no one cares. You may have a specialized skill, whether that's in IT or security or whatever it may be, but for every one of you, there's another 100 civilians out there who have either been doing it in the civilian world for the past 4 years that you've been in the military, or they've gone to college to do that since you've been in the military. So don't assume that your veteran status means jack shit on the outside.
Nobody cares. And the problem is, not really a problem, but the reality is the people in the civilian world have zero idea what you did as a Marine infantryman. They compare your service just the same as some dude who's like a cook on a ship who did nothing. Like, exactly. And I don't want my cooks on the ships, don't take that as you did nothing. But there's a difference. There's a difference in those kind of jobs, but only we know that. The people in the real world don't know that and couldn't care less. You know what I'm saying? Like, they all just assume everybody's been to combat and they're all crazy and stuff. So, well, not really, but
they don't know. So if you're the the combat veteran staff sergeant, or
nobody cares,
or you're the Lance Corporal cook on a naval ship, no one knows the difference on the outside, and no one actually gives a shit. So that being said,
sell those skills for sure.
Yeah, sell those skills. Be smart about everything it is you do. Be smart about everything it is you say, especially in these interviews, because even on the outside, like, it's a big world, but those communities are small. Whether it's the IT community, security, whatever it is you're doing, word gets around about you. We had an interview. This was over a year ago now, but one of the kids that we interviewed to come work for Marathon was actually a junior to one of the guys that mentored me at 111. So when I saw that he was a JFO, I asked him, I was like, hey, do you know so-and-so? He was like, yeah. Well, prior to me actually having this interview, I had already called my buddy and said, hey, like, tell me about this kid. He said, yeah, he's a shithead. So I asked him, I was like, well, what would Staff Sergeant Metis say about you? And he kind of just went silent. And I was like, okay, that's it. Yeah, that was the end of that one. So I felt bad for
tough.
But if he had at least come up with a significant and honest answer, we might have thought a little bit different about him.
Yeah, like, hey, we just had differing personalities. We like to attack the objective different ways. He sees it one way, I see it another. You know, one thing I will also, let me add on, and then we can end this here. If you're going to use someone that was in your chain of command as a reference, fucking let them know beforehand. I had a call from a company out of the blue from one of my guys that was applying for a job who was kind of a shitbag, you know, and I hate to say that. And he was kind of someone I didn't really trust to do. It was a security job. And I told him, I'm like, hey, to be 100% honest, I wouldn't trust him with that kind of job. And I felt bad telling the people, the hiring manager, whoever it was that contacted me that. But I didn't even know they were going to be calling me. Like, he never even let me know that they were going to be calling or that he was putting me down as a rep. I haven't even talked to the kid in years. Mm-hmm. And, so, you know, do those people a favor and help them set you up for success by reaching out to them and being like, hey, I'm applying for this job. I'm going to put you down as a reference just so that they have a heads up that call could be coming. That way they can maybe think about some stuff to say about you before, you know. For me, I'm like surprised. I'm like, oh, hey, what's up? Yeah, I think, you know, but that's just I guess that's my last piece of advice. Before we jump off here, do you put your social media out there or anything like that?
Yeah, all I really have is Facebook and LinkedIn, but you can look me up by my name. I don't have any secrets, and I think most of it's relatively private anyway. But if you have questions, feel free to message me or, you know, hit me up anytime. Or if you know you're one of the guys, if you happen to see this and I haven't seen you in a couple of years, you're one of the old boys from deployment. You know, definitely feel free to reach out.
Sweet, man.
It's been a long time since I've seen a lot of old friends.
Yeah, for sure. And if anybody reaches out and they can't get a hold of you, like, they can reach out to me and I'll try to put them in contact with you and stuff like that. So for everybody, you know, make sure to hit up my Instagram. It's at Former Action Guys, at JKrimmer Graphics. Both of those, jkrimmergraphics.com is the website. Make sure to check that out. Pick up a sticker or two. And, oh, yeah, check it out. You got the Tumblr right there, the Former Action Guys podcast Tumblr, available at jkrimmergraphics.com. Cassidy, man, I appreciate you coming on the show and kind of talking through the life of the Mortarman and that transition, because it's tough to do a lat move, especially to a community like the 0861 community where it's a very technical skill and everybody's judging you.
I appreciate it, Justin. Thanks for having me.
For sure, man.